Hello everyone and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host Nick Henning, and today we're going to be doing Dune Imperium. Now, if you are familiar with the World Series of Board Gaming, you'll know that actually Dune Imperium might be a completely defunct format because Dune Uprising is going to replace it in 2025. It is fundamentally the same game, but the nuances are definitely very different. How the cards are different, how all the spaces are different. I've played it a couple times. I think that Dune Uprising does seem like an improvement over the base game, but I will say that it is also just more than the base game. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a better design because this game is more accessible for folks, the Dune Imperium one that we're about to play here. But because this is going to potentially be a defunct format, and I'd like to save time on my holiday, we're going to play this puppy at 200% speed. So we'll see if we can keep up with these players here. We've got John in seat 1, and yes, that is John D. Clare of board game design fame. JC in seat 2, who is this year's absolute rock star, getting to final table after final table after final table. You've seen him a couple times on the channel already, including playing against me in the Lost Ruins of Arnak final. And then we have in seat 3, Derek, and then in seat 4, Tannon, both of which who are new to me as players in these settings, although I think I've seen both of them around the event before. Traditionally, my understanding is that seat 3 is sort of the preferred seat because you get to go first on round 7 for that big, huge combat. And the Beast is pretty good at WSBG. They draft leaders in reverse turn order. So Tannon grabbed Helena, which allows you to get more control and access to the card row. And we see there, I don't know if I pronounced this right, but Liet Kynes, which allows for some really wacky Fremen combo decks. So you just kind of jam a whole bunch of Fremen together, draw a ton of cards, and then get 2 per Fremen using her bottom reveal ability. That might be the very first thing that I'm keeping my eye on if I am Tannon in that seat, trying to make sure that I can buy an early Liet Kynes and build that crazy combo. JC grabs himself Count Ilban Richesee, which is an interesting choice in the sense that he doesn't have a competitor. There's no Duke Leto here really competing for that Mentat space. And so, that he's one of the few guys in the first round that I think really can take advantage of not needing a Swordmaster in the game and just essentially jamming Mentat over and over again, using Ilban's basically strength at taking those green actions. And then in seat 1, the famed Baron Harkonnen, who is just raw power-wise, essentially starts with an extra victory point. 2 track bumps is basically +1 point. So gets to play the game on a little bit of easy mode in terms of what the points are required, but does need to acquire money for those intrigue cards when he uses the ring, as well as needs to do the actual 4 push of troops at some point in the battle to make sure things work out here. Looks like we already are fired off pretty quickly here. I'm actually not seeing... Maybe John actually drafted first and is in seat 4. Maybe actually it is JC who was in seat 1 and led off, because I don't think that John has actually taken an action yet. So I maybe just misread the draft, which makes sense. I was about to say I was pretty surprised to see Baron Harkonnen go as the first player, and that does put Tannon in the driver's seat of the seat 3 for the later combats there, which makes a lot more sense. JC fires off with a deploy allies to make some Fremen friendships and just get some water. A very basic resource grab choice. Tannon grabbing a couple of dollars here with the Emperor. And Derek looks like he actually went and garnered some support or whatever that action is up in the green space there. It gives him +1 persuasion, which might mean that he's going for an early reveal. That would be a pretty risky play if Tannon had played essentially the signet ring. I mean, Derek might have been doing a 50-50 shot there if that was the case. JC will fire off with his signet ring in the aftermath of John grabbing a couple quick 3 coins, and then JC will essentially just grab some extra troops and a card draw, and then allow the fact that he is first player means it's not ideal to push some troops in, but this is a combat where you win a couple coins, second, third place. So he pushes 2 troops in, kind of dares people to go over the top of that. First place here is 2 coins and a track bump, which would be pretty nice. Derek does indeed go for the early reveal to grab Liet Kynes. So, pretty lucky on his part that Tannon did not just jam Helena with a signet ring to pull that off the board, because that might have really ruined Derek's whole turn if he was angling for Liet Kynes and didn't manage to get it. But it does mean 1 worker unused, and that early reveal for those powerful cards is pretty legitimate in this game. It feels kind of like bad, like you're leaving power on the table, but you're able to use your cards. And that's one of the things that's, I think, really interesting about the interaction system of like you have workers, but it costs a card to employ them. Tannon here, where did Tannon head with the red worker? Burp, burp, burp. Legitimately don't see red worker anywhere in play, except for, of course, the one in the Emperor. We do, however, see John push in with some extra troops over the top of JC by heading out to, I think it's Arakeen or Carthag, one of those guys. And he will take the first fight here for essentially the free track move and 2 coins. JC is content with taking 3 coins. He gets the Bene Gesserit card that I believe helps you trash cards out of your deck, so is going to thin out the deck a little bit. And back to Tannon, who I guess, he also took the +1 persuasion. That's the word I'm looking for. I keep calling it money, but Solari is actually money in this game. +1 persuasion, allowing him to get Worm Riders, which isn't really going to turn on until he makes friends with the Fremen, which he has not yet. But allows him to get some really powerful reveals, huge sword reveals in the mid to late game to kind of surprise win combats, as long as he does make the Fremen alliance there. John is going to grab the worse trashing card, I believe, the Council Administrator compared to the Bene Gesserit one, but also will allow him to thin his deck just a little bit. And makes sense. On the top row there, like there's the Fedaykin Commando, Duncan, Idaho, and like Bene Gesserit Memories, which are all like fine cards, but I think not ones that you really kind of go crazy for. The most powerful card certainly that we see in this round is Liet, followed by the Worm Riders. There are the more interesting ones, and JC and John's pickups are a little bit more just kind of moving up the deck there. But of course, those are the 2 players that kind of pushed into the combat, which makes sense. They were focusing less on their development, whereas Tannon and Derek heading up to that green spot. Is it the Hall of Oratory? Maybe that's what it is. It's the Hall of Oratory. And that'll wrap us up in round 1. Whew. Out of breath already. Let's see if we can keep this up. We flip a victory point and a trash for first place, and then pretty scuzzy third place rewards here with just a single spice. This is one of those combats that feels a lot more like take, all or nothing. Second place here does get a water, which is nice and decent, but just feels bad compared to what you get for first place. So if you're going to want to push here, you're probably going to want to push hard. Derek's going to take advantage of the Maker's Spice situation to grab a couple of the spice using the water that he had, going up to 4 spice here and pushing 2 troops in, the maximum that he could in this particular instance. It is possible that Derek is going to use that 4 spice and go do some spice trading for a whole bunch of coins out of nowhere. We're going to see a Helena ring use to knock off the Fedaykin Commando, which makes sense. Tannon is going to go for kind of like a Fremen situation. Also makes it a little bit more difficult for Derek, who's doing the Fremen thing. So just kind of bouncing out a card there. But flips power play, which is a pretty nice double movement on a track along the way there. I think that was a Baron signet ring from John there, although I did not see where he actually ended up placing his worker. Yellow probably blending in with the desert of the board. We do see JC using Count Ilban's primary perks, which is doing Mentat stuff. So he does that to continue cycling through his deck. He's going to be able to draw a bunch of cards. We see that he has drawn that Bene Gesserit memory card that's going to allow him to probably trash that dagger out of his deck. Of all the people that are in the game, Count Ilban's actually the one that can use daggers the most because he is kind of always jamming Mentat. But I think even still, it is pretty reasonable to get out those cards out, as they do tend to be the weakest. Oh, I finally see where John went. He picked up an intrigue card with the Bene Gesserit. That makes sense. On to Derek's turn, and he's very thankfully giving me a breather here. He's got a lot of players in the aftermath of him that could contest this combat. If he wants to really kind of push in hard, he could, but then it ends up being kind of wasted resources, which is the really awkward thing about being in first seat and considering combats in this game. The players aren't super duper rich. They do have money access to them, but maybe not quite enough for swordsmen. I could see Derek going up to ship out some spice right now, get a whole bunch of cash, and then figure out how to use it next turn. But it looks like he's got to seek allies here that he doesn't want to shuffle back into his deck, which makes a lot of sense. So the spice is going to sit a little bit fallow for a while here, and instead he's going to choose what action to take in play here. I could see him going for sort of that Fremen water, just because he's already spent his water to pick up spice this turn, and being waterless does limit your actions. But looks like he says, I don't want this spice to sit fallow. I've got some crap in my discard pile that I'm happy to get rid of, particularly this dagger that Nick's head is blocking. So he goes ahead and trashes that and draws a couple cards out of his deck, which might draw him into persuasion that will allow him to buy more things that he needs. Though I wouldn't be too surprised to see Derek just buy piles of the base, whatever the Fremen card is called, the like base 2 persuasion card that if you play this game a whole bunch, people call it silvers from Dominion because they're 2 persuasion for buying more cards. Those go really well with the Liet Kynes strategy. Tannon is going to go full Helena, use the coins that he basically picked up on the first round of the game to head to the High Council. He is going to be doing the deck building thing as much as possible in this game, which seems great, although a little bit awkward. The Worm Riders that he has, he's not quite supporting those just yet. John is going to happily grab a water here, push an easy, lazy troop into battle. He doesn't really have the strength to contest a first place win here. But is happy to scoop up maybe a spice and a water, depending on what JC does. JC getting the last seat here. He actually gets to take 2 actions in a row. I would not be surprised to see him go over the top, claim this victory, and the card trash. He also has sort of the card trash. Oh, hey, we see me right behind John there. This is my favorite part about doing these videos, obviously. We see JC could win this battle, do a card trash with Bene Gesserit, and just really, really tighten up his deck pretty quickly into the game. Power play pickup here from Derek makes a ton of sense. That's just a nice, essentially full-on victory point when you play it to move up one of the tracks. Sometimes you can sneak away an alliance from someone that they are not expecting you to take as you shoot to the very top of the track. So some good options there. And it's actually pretty nice that he has reshuffled his deck because power play is better in the mid game rather than the early game. And he's going to be able to draw from his deck and consider that later. Tannon will go ahead and pick up that Fremen card that we had talked about earlier. And then he'll also pick up a Bene Gesserit sister to pair with that. So putting in a bunch of upgrades to his deck. Nothing super exciting, but some nice fundamental things. John here will continue his Spacing Guild stuff, and we will flip the absolute monstrous Lady Jessica here, which might be very exciting for Tannon, who is most set up to claim it and gets to go first next turn. So unless JC, by some miracle, manages a 7 persuasion here, which would make absolutely no sense, I do foresee that happening for Tannon, which is pretty great. We see JC indeed going to Carthag here, and we'll push in 3 troops to go ahead and claim the victory, short of any surprises from Baron Harkonnen's intrigues or anything like that. And then a reveal here, which does not hit the 7 that we were talking about, but does give an extra dagger just to kind of put some space there, and claims Bene Gesserit Memories, which I think is a card that it looks like it draws a card, and then maybe also draws a card, Bene Gesserit card from your discard pile, which works with one Bene Gesserit card that he does have, but it's just a fine card to have all around. It's going to be 2 persuasion, nothing wrong with it. Anyway, they all get a whole lot more exciting if he is able to pick up Mother Reverend there. We are flipping up a lot of exciting cards in the middle of the game here, which is great for a Dune Imperium game because sometimes we have this problem of the cards in the middle really clogging up, becoming these like boring, crappy 1-cost cards that no one wants to buy. But actually, it's a fair amount of diversity up there. You know, for John, he might be looking at the Smuggler's Thopter there because he's got sort of the Spacing Guild support. There's a good chance that he'll do some fold spacing action, and then he'll be able to draw 2 cards when he plays Smuggler's Thopter. It has very limited spaces where it can go on the board, but that power to draw 2 cards while doing it is just pretty nice. So that might be his consolation prize, since he doesn't seem to have much persuasion power in his deck, and is unlikely to be able to pick up the Reverend or Lady Jessica on the way. Whew, round 3. Each of the players here are going to consider their hands. I think that if Tannon draws the ring, the signet ring for Helena, the first thing he would do is play the signet ring and claim Lady Jessica to prevent anyone else from snatching it up. That's not the case, however. Instead, we're going to play a Fedaykin Commando here and head out into the desert, grabbing nice triple spice. Actually, nothing wrong with that. That's another advantage of going first this turn. And did he trash nothing? Looks like he might like his whole hand. So a wasted trash on the Fedaykin Commando there. And get people telling me it's not Fedaykin. John here has double spice. He'll use it to pick up double water. He'll use it to pick up just a whole pile of spice from the middle. Unfortunately, he has no troops, so is unable to push anything into this conflict. The conflict, by the way, is a Mentat grab. JC's probably a little bit disappointed to see that. It is always annoying as Ilban when people are taking the Mentat off the table, and having the combat take the Mentat off the table is just an extra bonus of annoying. But he'll shrug his shoulders, move on, and pick up some extra money here, giving him access to a full bevy of different green actions that Count Ilban likes to see along the way. In fact, he's got himself up to 8, potentially opening up a Swordmaster on turn 3 as the first player to really contest that space. Derek here would have been able to grab Swordmaster if he did do the shipping spice thing from last turn, but again, the really awkwardness of the Sieg allies kind of making it that wasn't a line that he thought seemed very good, and I think that seems reasonable. I don't have enough experience in this game to really say whether passing on a first round Sieg allies is as painful as it kind of seems like it might be. You'll get to use it at some point, but it does feel bad to shuffle in basically a do nothing card into your deck, and for your persuasion round to flip that do nothing card. In fact, also he needed the money probably to buy what he bought. He bought something good, and I'm blanking on it. We'll remember when we see it. So he probably actually needed the persuasion. That was part of the decision-making process there too. But it's always sad to be the person that misses out on the swordsman when you have the opportunity to. And now Derek is kind of dog and turn order here, in that, like, if John gets a couple more coins, Derek's not going to get it next turn either. So something to be aware of. I do wonder if that is what Derek is debating here. He says, all right, well, I'll go get the money now. I don't have quite as much spice as I did last turn, but I do still want to get into a position where I can do something with it. I can't quite tell if that puts him at 8 or if that is 7 coins. He might even just acknowledge that 7 coins is fine and go to the High Council instead, which is a very good consolation prize. Really quick whip around where Tannon takes his action to just scoop some water with the needed Fremen alliances that he's trying to seek out. John here using the council administrator to do some fold spacing. I did not see if he trashed anything, but hopefully he did. JC going for an early reveal here to scoop up Lady Jessica, which works out very, very well for him. I think that right now JC is in a nice position. It is funny to go up to 8 coins and not even get Swordmaster, but Derek is going to be pretty happy about that situation, as apparently he did have the sufficient coins there, which makes sense. He paid 2 spice, which gives 8 coins. So of course he had 9 coins instead of 7 or 8. And he gets to grab up Swordmaster this turn. But Lady Jessica is just so incredibly powerful that I like JC's early pass here. And having seen what John did on his turn, he's not concerned about not being able to get access to the Swordmaster next turn. We've seen 2 early passes this game, right, for powerful cards. So that's just kind of going to show you that players who have the experience in this game do understand that a couple of those cards are just absolutely worth missing a whole action for. It looks like Tannon here might be completely uncontested in this combat, essentially picking up an intrigue card, a Mentat, and a couple coins for next turn. Even throwing 1 extra troop in here would be pretty nice for Derek here, because he could just get an intrigue and 2 coins. But he says, I'll push in 3, the 2 extra troops essentially giving him a Mentat in addition, right? So a single action giving you back 2 troops, I actually think is kind of close. I could see him having just limped in for a 3rd place here, but the advantage of your opponent not having that Mentat is not to be understated. And so pushing in for the 3 makes sense. Derek is going to have 4 whole actions next turn, which means he's probably going to suck at buying stuff for the rest of this game, because he's going to be using all of his cards to play things out. It's a little bit awkward for Elite Kind strategy in that you actually wanted to kind of just play a few actions, draw a ton of cards, and play all your Fremen stuff. Hooray. And there he goes, buying some of those basic Fremen liaisons. Is that what they're called? Arrakis agent? Who knows? ChatGPT. What do we call the guys that give you persuasion in this game? Flip another non-victory point combat objective here. It does give a half a point as you move up one of the tracks of your choice, as well as a pair of intrigues. Second and third here, not bad either, with some intrigue and spice action going on. So might see a couple of limps here. I mean, frankly, the players do not have much in their reserves. Their garrisons are really lacking in troops as they've focused on accumulating the spice, the coins, the Solari, that is coins, and water to continue developing board positions as we enter turn 4 here, with the highest score still just being at 2 points as everyone kind of moves up their track here. The only person who's gotten any friendship points yet being John, having moved onto the second place of the Fremen Alliance here, and JC a single point for the earlier combat win. John has a whole pile of spice here that he could do a couple of things with. He'll start off with a flippant discard of this to draw a card off the top of his deck, it looks like. It always has some extra text. It might be like one of those you can trash it if you want to type of cards. Didn't look too happy with that. Even at 200% speed, I could say that he did not draw the card he was hoping to draw. Which, I mean, frankly, when you shuffle about 9 cards or so, maybe it was a little bit less than that, but you're not expecting that you're going to hit what you want, even if there's 3 cards of that type in your deck. Odds are not in your favor at that stage. Diplomacy here does give a lot of options, though. John will go fishing for another intrigue to replace the one that he got rid of. This will also give him another point as he moves up to the second space there. JC using his dagger. Mentat's not really on the play here, so he might just straight up be going for the Swordmaster here, which makes a ton of sense. He's uncontested, but might as well do it early. And just kind of get it out of the way. And also, when he's doing those green actions, he does get to draw himself extra cards. You want to draw those extra cards earlier so you can formulate your game plan for what it's going to look like for the rest of the turn. And it looks like he's not rushing for any particular spaces at this point in time. In this game, I would say that the players have not bought a lot of faction access. So those faction spaces, you don't see kind of like an over jamming like of, oh, I can't play my diplomacy because all these other spaces have been claimed. There's still a fair amount of development up in the green board actions in the yellow section to take resources. And that makes it so that those actions on the left side of the board are not as hotly contested as they might be later in the game. Derek here debating what he's going to do with one of his 4 actions this turn. I mean, he could do all sorts of stuff. He's got a water here, so he could pick up the spice in the Haga Basin there because it's accumulated some extra. That wouldn't be too terrible for him. He might want to get some extra troops so he could push guys into play while doing that. Both Tannon and JC have water to contest that action, so it's not going to necessarily sit around if he takes a sweet time with it. He does want to be doing as many kind of diplomacy style actions as possible. Speak of the devil, there he is, and he'll pick up 2 coins, which will get him up to the magic 5 if he wants to do the High Council and Swordmaster full setup. Tannon here coming out with the Worm Riders. The bottom of the Worm Riders here isn't really going to be doing anything yet, so using this for the top right now is great, so he can pick up a couple extra free spice. That's the nice thing about this Worm Riders card, is its biggest punch really does come when he is revealing it for the +6 swords or whatever ridiculousness if you're like on full Fremen Alliance for kind of surprise combat wins. But the fact that you can play it at this stage of the game, take one of these normal yellow or blue actions, use this pile of spice, which he does in this instance to ship spice out and pick up so much money that he won't be able to really use this turn because he already has a High Council seat, even if Derek wasn't taking his, and the Swordmaster situation is blocked up for the turn. That is going to put John last in Swordmaster, which might actually mean that John just doesn't take Swordmaster this game, as we are entering turn 5. And the game's going to be over on turn 7 or 8. We'll see. Fold space pickup here for John. Probably using maybe another fold space. I don't see what card he has in play, so maybe he folded into a fold. Oh, or that was a council administrator thing that he used and then trashed itself, perhaps? Fascinating. Acknowledging that he doesn't really want to be going to that location anymore and just cleaning up his deck because the bottom of that card is not terribly exciting. That's a really interesting line. Actually, don't think I realized you could trash yourself. It doesn't not make sense. Plenty of games have that system. There's just always these different nuances. JC says, I'm going to pick up a ton of water. I can always use 2 water at the research station to buy a boatload of cards, which is going to do fun stuff with Jessica because I want to be cycling this deck as fast as possible and doing silly stuff with her variety of powers. Tannon here reminding me that Helena actually doesn't care about the swordsman being in play, using her power to just kind of go there and say, I don't care that it's blocked, I am rich. And getting his 3rd action on this turn too, demonstrating the power of Helena in this moment, which is great. Helena definitely much stronger in a 4-player game than any other player count because of that inability to be blocked on those certain action spaces. Opulence here is a pretty huge card, a nice build around that you can use coins to convert into victory points. Usually you see people pick this up earlier and make their game plan around it, but even if it picked it up at this stage in the game and used it just once for a victory point, it would be well worth it. So wouldn't be too surprised to see that's the case. JC here says, all right, well, if you guys aren't going to go fight, I'll head to Carthag and just limp out here. I'll get my 1 intrigue and put this guy. This is a good use of a reconnaissance action to just sort of see if I can get anything silly out of this fight since no one else seems to really want to be fighting. And yeah, in general, the fights so far have not been full scrums, right? People have been winning with just 3 troops, and it's not uncommon at the beginning of the game, but you can certainly see people get into quagmire situations. And I don't think we've seen a lot of 3rd places claimed. So people are kind of really taking their turns. There's sort of a dance of like, I will go and play for 1st. No, you would like 1st? That's fine. I'll take 2nd. And then next turn, it's the same kind of relationship, but maybe with 2 different players along the way. Derek here says, I don't really like this peace plan. I am going to go ahead and push both in. Might as well. It's not that difficult to push these 2 guys in, but Tannon is coming in after him with more troops in garrison. However, Derek does have the 4th action to follow up if he really wants to. Tannon says, nah, that's silly. I've got 3, easy for me to go, 3, 2, 1. And all of a sudden JC's play to push in a single guy doesn't feel quite as good. That being said, I think the 3rd place rewards in this combat are better than most 3rd place rewards. So I'm sure he's not too upset to just sort of limp in and get something for his guys there. A reveal for 5 here. Oh, and I did not see the Peter get flips up. That's really nice for JC's ultimate, like, essentially research station strategy, right? He's going to trash cards out of his deck, and he picks up the Missionaria Protectiva for a single thing. This card is a complete, feast or famine, but because JC has, I believe Jessica is a Bene Gesserit, and also 2 other Bene Gesserit cards in his deck, the Missionaria Protectiva is not unlikely to hit, given that he's going to collect all this water, do research station stuff. He can then play the Missionaria for that essentially track bump that he gets just for playing that card as long as there's another Bene Gesserit in play. He has the 3rd swordsman, so it's a little bit less taxing on the cards in hand. That's a pretty nice combo right there. He can even use the Missionaria to take the research action and draw all those extra cards, but it does mean that he's going to have some good draws as he goes into his hand. And we see him checking his deck there. I think that Derek is still debating his turn. He's clearly the table thinker, and is asking what cards people have in their discard pile, maybe checking to see if he can figure out what Tannon's options are that are remaining, given what he may have already played. Although Tannon's out of workers, I think. I think he wants to see if he can come in over the top. Oh, he's counting Tannon's daggers and seeing if he needs to come in over the top or if he can come in with 1 extra troop, maybe tie him and then win off of a dagger situation. That's exactly what's going to happen as he heads down to Fremenland here. And this fight that just turned from a bunch of limping has suddenly actually become our biggest combat of the game. He's trying to see, can I be greedy? Can I just put 3 in, or do I need to put both? Do I need to go up to 4? That's clever. that's the kind of like detail and attention that I think really makes a nice difference in me playing and someone who really knows what they're doing playing the game, right? Paying attention to what people have in their discard piles. I'm not sure if that's a house rule for WSBG or just a general rule. And looks like he might have he either changed his mind, but I think what he did was played a card that allowed him to play on top of the fold space. He decided that he actually wanted to save the water. It wasn't worth the conflict. Backed it all up, said, if I don't feel confident in pushing maybe just the one guy in and winning it, doesn't necessarily feel worth it for the difference here. I'll just grab the fold space, start moving up that track for the victory point that it gives me along the way. And the only person that we haven't seen score any points yet is Tannon, who will use his influence and the High Council to go ahead and pick up the opulence card I was talking about earlier to give him an access to scoring additional points. It's an Imperial Spy pickup for Derek there, who, again, I think he could just be buying tons of Fremen liaison cards and doesn't seem to have leaned too heavily into the Liet Kynes combo, so we're not going to see anything nutty happening from him this game, which is okay. I saw someone pull it off once with a Guild Bankers and a Liet Kynes, so it's like every spice must flow is 6 rather than 9, and then they drew like a gazillion cards and had 24 persuasion off of Liet Kynes, basically like doubling every Arrakis liaison, and bought 4 victory points in a turn. It was very cool to see, so I tried to do it myself once, and I got up to 3, so even just decent players can get there. This turn we flip a interesting conflict. It's the choose 2 tracks to go up on. So it's kind of like a victory point flexed across different alliance systems, and water for second and third place, which makes it not bad to limp in. But everybody is completely cleared out of the garrison here as we head into turn 5. We get a kickoff with JC with Lady Jessica drawing into his deck. Almost certainly he's going to hit that Missionaria Protectiva just to make a point of how incredibly powerful Lady Jessica is, as JC goes out and grabs a whole bunch of spice at the Haga Basin for 1 little water. Derek says, I'll grab 2 spice for no water if you don't mind me, using a Smuggler's Thopter, which is going to draw him 2 cards. It does explain why he said, I'll do the fold spacing thing last turn. He might have realized that he was about to draw into the Smuggler's Thopter card in his deck, which I did not realize that he picked up earlier, but is probably pretty disappointing pickup for John at the time. I don't even know if he was able to buy it, but always something to pay attention to. Tannon says, I've got some coins on hand. I'd like some extra actions this turn, please. I am going to just be sitting here playing all round long, as I will grab the Mentat action space before John. John's been pretty boxed out on taking green actions. He hasn't kind of prioritized it, I would say, in the same way that the other players have. Still sitting on this absolute hoard of spice for quite a long period of time. So it'd be interesting to see if he decides to cash that in now, or if he's essentially waiting for the perfect highliner situation to go whole hog on it. Is one of the problems with playing the Baron is that essentially you need these coins to be using your signet ring, buying those intrigue cards along the way, and it does sometimes put a little bit of a choke on your other actions. Given that it is turn 5, I would say this is the very last turn that I would even consider buying the Swordsman. He might just want to say, I'm not going to bother with it for the rest of the game. He might want to say, I'm going to get just maybe 1 High Council seat instead so I can buy some Spicemas flows. But he also might not really have the resources to do that. And he's definitely in the tank here. I think kind of feeling, I would say of all the players, he probably has the weakest deck so far. Derek having picked up, that Smuggler's Thopter, Liet Kynes, JC having picked up, we've talked at length actually about how JC's deck is one of the strongest ones out there. Tannon has the Worm Riders and the Opulence, and John doesn't really have any of those power cards that pack that sort of punch in there. He's going to fold space, which might be why he was thinking. It gives far too many options, as he'll draw another card, but he'll just head to the Emperor saying, I'll just march up the track here to score my half of victory point. JC will get a ring with Count Ilban here and head up to sell that spice that he just picked up for piles and piles of cash which he can't be using for the Swordmaster anymore, but looks like he is going to pick himself up a High Council seat, which makes sense. He probably is, drawing cards with the research station, so he wants to be buying Spicemas Flows this game, and he can also just constantly be buying the Mentat, as all the other players, except for John, who is in front of him, are a little bit low on money. So it'll be interesting to see if John blocks Count Ilban's, Mentat cycle ability, but there's a lot of actions being able to be used by players in this game, as we have 3 swordsmen already on turn 5 here. Tannon gets some troops and probably is going to push them into play because there's really no one to contest them until we get some more troops. Might also just be that JC actually is going to use all those coins, or John could use all those coins to just rally some guys and get folks in the garrison. That is something that is going to need to happen for Baron Harkonnen at some point anyway. But we will head I think it's our first move to Siege Tabur of the game, as the voice, which is probably one of the best 2-cost cards here, is going to block a space on board. I didn't quite see what it is, but I imagine that is what he is debating at this stage. And, maybe he's going to use the flag to say people can't go here. Frankly, from a competitive design standpoint, a really taxing card, because you have to go around and be like, what do I think you're going to do? What do I think you're going to do? And figure out what space you want to block. Obviously, the easier way to play this is just say, well, I want to take this action space next turn, so I'm going to block it so no one else can. But he might not have that option because he only has the 2 workers. So yeah, he's just trying to get in people's way right now, rather than giving himself a certain thing. And you're not going to not use the power that you just had access to. It's also last in turn order this turn, so it's kind of the worst time for the voice to come into play and be terribly useful. JC here is debating it for a while, which means that he either doesn't have access to the High Council, or the extra 2 for the High Council is not quite as exciting as he wanted to be, or there was something else exciting that he could do, maybe like a diplomacy that would allow him to move up on a track. It is hard to give away those half victory points, but that extra 2 persuasion going forward is going to be really helpful, as every player has High Council, every player has swordsman, except for John, who doesn't do any of those things. John's a lot more focused on the tracks. In terms of track bumps, comparing all players, we've got actually Derek, who's moved 6 times in total, John, who's moved 7 times in total, Tannon, who's only moved 4 times in total, mostly on the Fremen for the Worm Rider reasons, and then JC, who's moved 4 times in total. Actually, JC's moved the least on the tracks, probably a reflection of the fact that he has sort of developed the deck the most, I would say. Tannon here, hearing me talking about track movements, and gets on the Bene Gesserit train so he can move up towards that victory point. And we see a couple of limps here as folks take a various number of actions along the way. Derek's was an Arakeen, since Carthag was blocked off there. Here's a reveal, and that does look like a 7 actually from JC. So I'm expecting a Spicemas flow. Yep, there it is. Maybe he had even more than 7 and also bought that memory, or the genetic memories, or whatever it's called. Couldn't quite see the action there, but yeah, the Spicemas flow is the flagship thing in that moment. We have Fremen Alliance guy there, so I think that is a Leah Kynes getting to fire off, doubling those. She's 2 value per Fremen Arrakis liaison, or whatever those cards are, which very, very quickly can add up to 9 with just basically just 2 of them and something else. The Worm Riders coming into play here, along with the Reverend Mother, to push Tannon's conflict here to the absolute top tiers. Wouldn't be surprised to see him use one of those to finish off his alliance with the Fremen, just get up there, get that free water. But then it's a good question of where his second one is going to go. Does he want to move up on the Spacing Guild track where he has nothing just to get towards that victory point, or does he want to claim one of the points that he's going to be able to grab along the way? Does indeed grab the Fremen, which makes a fair amount of sense. It unlocks the full potential of the Worm Riders now. And then he says, I'll just go up on the Emperor. I don't think I'm going to head over here. The money's not too appealing. I want to use my spice on other things. Plus, if I do decide to go to the Emperor track, maybe I can push all the way to the top. So he's putting himself in a leader position. I think that makes sense. I guess he could do the same thing on the Bene Gesserit track. I'm already retired. You're talking so fast I don't have air. Jesus. Ooh, all right. This is now round 6, and we see players. I think on turn 4, I was joking about how we were just basically sitting all on 2 and 1 victory point, and very quickly we've turned around. We've got a bunch of players at 4, and Derek sitting here on 5. We've got blue, which is JC, has 2 very near victory points. Yellow, which is John, has 1 near victory point. Tannon as red has 1 near victory point, and Derek as green does not have any near victory points. So actually it's like kind of a dead heat in terms of points right now. I mean, people have to do the work of the things I just talked about, but a lot of close tracks, and all of them are from the players who are the point behind Derek. So an extremely close game between our players here, which I think favors JC's stronger deck right now if the game is close. Tannon also has a nuts deck. He's got the Worm Riders, he's got the Reverend Mother, he's got the Opulence. So there's some pretty cool stuff that he can be doing. It kind of depends on how his deck is going to cough those cards up, and if he's going to have the resources to take advantage of things like Opulence, which he doesn't have the money for right now. We get a real battle for a real place. I don't know which location this is a battle for, but it hardly matters. It is the victory point that we care about. And Derek's going to kick off here with a scoop up of a bunch of spice using the water that he'd had, and limping in with the last soldier that had been left over from, I guess, a preceding. Oh, no, from the beast is the reason why. Tannon sells for a whole bunch of gold. So I was just talking about how he needs Solari to activate that opulence. And to him, he says that time is now. Interestingly enough, he doesn't sell all the spice. He keeps 2 of it, which I wonder if that means he's heading over to selective breeding. That he's doing something with that 2 spice. Selective breeding is the one that calls my name the most, but I'm not entirely sure. John here says, let me see if I can get to the top of the Bene Gesserit track, just doing normal diplomacy things. Grabs himself an intrigue card here, and I can't quite tell. He might actually have 4 cards in hand, but he has blocked the space that punishes him for having too many cards. It is dangerous if other people have the intrigue card that lets them go onto the same space as him. So we'll see if anybody kind of takes advantage of that. Derek has used that exact card earlier in the game. Also might just be that John is 3 and I can't see, but it looks like he has a bunch. JC going into a long tank session here, trying to decide what he wants to do with his turn. He leads off with a mission area, which is not its most efficient use, but he's going to do exactly what we talked about before, sending the mission area to the research station. But you'd hope to lead with a Bene Gesserit in advance, but he drew all of his Bene Gesserit's last turn, Jessica and the memories and the blah, blah, blah. So he says, well, I better use this card as essentially a bad reconnaissance now. And Derek says, that's cute. I've got some spice. I'd like to highline, please. As he just picks up an absolute boat of water, which he had just used to get that spice. Pushes a bunch of troops into the conflict and says, how much do I want to push in here? I wouldn't be surprised to see him push in a total of 4. 4 is a pretty nice, safe, threatening number of troops. You can't guarantee that you're going to win on 4, but with no one having anything in garrison, 4 is a nice number to sort of, it's not going to guarantee that he wins this conflict. There's cards that allow people to like kind of make and deploy 3 guys. Tannon has Worm Riders, which can do some nonsense, although I think Worm Riders is in the discard pile right now. If JC just drew into Lady Jessica, he's got like Peter. I guess that doesn't really help much, but there are a lot of intrigue cards in play that will allow people to do some quaint stuff. So you do want to make it difficult for other folks to get there. But you want to leave some guys behind. So I like pushing up to 4, obviously, since I suggested it. And Derek likes it too, which makes me feel really good about myself. we finally crapped up the row. I mean, the voice is a decent pickup, but Dr. Yay, the Scout, and the Carry-All, I don't think these are going to be cards that we're going to see. So we're not going to really see, I think, that many buys from the row anymore, which makes sense anyway. We are on turn 6. We're turning into let's just make victory points stage of the game. And Tannon will do exactly what we talked about. That selective breeding to draw some more cards, get himself towards a Spice Must Flow, trash some garbage out of the discard pile since he does have a big, thick discard pile right there, and get a victory point for moving up to that Bene Gesserit alliance there that he had. Not alliance, friendship. I forget what the actual terms are. One's an alliance, one's a friendship. I don't think it's a friendship. This is just my term. Alliance is at the top, friendships in the middle. The free victory point. John graciously giving me a chance to breathe here. He's got an absolute pile of resources. A Mentat pickup wouldn't be bad for him here. I think Mentats are basically just better Swordmasters than John at this stage for the rest of the game. They come with a card. They're a fraction of the cost. And it stops Count Ilban from doing Mentat things, which are always annoying and scary. That'd be my inclination. He might also say, I want a bunch of troops. He just has a bunch of coins. He's got a lot of spice. He's going to use a fold space here to grab the High Council seat. So to me that says, he's only got 2 actions, of course, but it meant that he wants to keep all of his cards in hand, or doesn't have access to greens and really wanted to go to High Council seat because if the fold space was his only access to green, then he can't do Mentat and High Council this turn. That's pretty rough though. Using a fold space to head to green space is not your ideal. That's what you want your signet rings and your dumb daggers to be used for. And admittedly, I think he's trashed one, maybe even both of them. JC says coins are cool, but mostly I like the victory point of making friends with the Emperor here. Sliding not everyone, most players into a 3-way tie for 5th. We see another Smuggler's Thopter here for Derek that's going to draw out more cards from his deck. Maybe he'll hit another Spice Must Flow this turn. Pretty boring action, though, as he just picks up a single spice. It's pretty interesting that he does that rather than like an Arakeen or a Carthag and just grab an intrigue card and a troop. A spice is definitely much weaker than that. I talked about how the row is not exciting, and then Tannon goes ahead and uses Helena's ring to put aside the voice and then flips Shifting Allegiances, which is extremely spicy. That is a nice flip up for John, who might just get to pick it up, as I think he's about to enter a pass turn here. Tannon says, I'm happily going to grab Carthag and just limp into this battle. I get a couple coins in the background, which is nice for opulent me. This is a reclaim with an intrigue card. I think it is. So maybe that could be why John was not as interested in Mentat stuff, knowing that he was going to pick up this guy again and get to take another action here. We see a signet ring in his hand, which I'm almost sure he's going to play. Does kind of beg the question of why he used a fold space. The fold space could have drawn the signet ring. That's got to be my inclination. And now he will pick up the Mentat. It sat around for another turn. It's an interesting line. I do feel like the fold space probably drew into that signet ring, which is kind of interesting and awkward. That's going to give him an intrigue card, putting him up to 4, and begging the question briefly of whether he wants to use one of them, but he is going to sit confidently in the fact that the Bene Gesserit secrets space is blocked. We'll see some genetic memories or whatever it is here for a Siege Tabur visit. Very awkward to be playing that card after the Missionaria Protectiva. But I guess actually I can see that it would not have allowed JC to go to the research station. So he was prioritizing going there, seeing how many people have access to 2 water to make sure that he had the persuasion to make that Spice Must Flow purchase this turn. Derek, as the first player, is the first to pass, which makes a ton of sense. He does indeed hit the 9 that he needs for the for the purchase of the worm, which I think also might be a reflection of why he played the card that he did to just kind of limp out into the desert. He was keeping his hand in such a way that the persuasion worked out nicely. Tannon here, I think, looks like he misses on getting enough persuasion to get a point, but he will get nicely compensated with a shifting allegiances and an okay voice. And then we flip out a recruiter to really kill the board from this stage forward for the rest of the game. That's normally a big bother for Helena, but Tannon's already got a bunch of good cards in his deck. He's going to need to reshuffle. He might not even really play the ring like that much more before the end of the game, but that is a downside of Helena, is that like remove from the row power really becomes pretty weak nearer to the end of the game here. I still don't think that we've seen the Baron's Master Stroke, which is something really nice that John does have in his back pocket. He is behind on points right now, but he'll get to limp in, trying to maybe take a second or third place for a couple coins here as where did he go for that? Maybe it was an intrigue card that let him limp in. JC buys himself Spice Must Flow, going up to 6 points. Reveal from John, he buys some kind of crap from the row, flipping up a space travel. I think that's an interesting pickup. I guess it has the advantage of allowing him to get more troops into play, and troops have seemed to be quite at a minimum in this one. But I do think that's going to diminish any chances that he's going to be able to get any points from a Spice Must Flow throughout the course of the game, which I think is going to put him in a little bit of a problematic position there. Looking at resources, we see everybody has at least 1 water, with the exception of JC. Most people have 2 water, a couple spice floating around, but John has an absolute boat of spice to give himself some cool highliner action coming into the future. Unfortunately for him, Derek has really gone up Spacing Guild. A lot of times you can kind of count on getting that Spacing Guild alliance later in the game, but it's been a hotly contested fold space kind of year, which is a bummer for them. Derek's 4 guys do seem like a little bit of overkill here, but I still think the flex was very appropriate to prevent other people from getting into the combat. And it will score him a victory point, putting him into 7 and in spitting distance of that final location there. Tannon here is first on turn 7, but does not have the spice to access Highliner. So actually John is going to be the one who's going to be able to come in big for these 2 victory points for this battle that we flip up here, which is going to allow him to catch up. So that if he is able to pull off a big push into the battle here, that's going to matter. And it looks like we're actually going to have a battle for Arakeen, which Derek just conquered. So a free troop for Derek is pretty nice. If Derek is able to win this, because he's got the most troops in garrison right now, that pretty much could be a game lock for him. So the players might end up working together to stop him. And Derek is last in turn order here. At the beginning of the game, being last in turn order is sort of favorable for combats, as you can kind of see what strength people are pushing on. But later in the game, I actually think that it becomes worse because the spots that are best at pushing troops into play get pushed out. And so Derek might be at the whim of what's essentially available. Tannon puts the vice on John by essentially pushing up the track here and saying, look, if you want to go do Highliner stuff, that's cool. I'm going to try to take this Bene Gesserit thing from you. And John says, well, I can play what my cards let me to play. And so a Sardaukar Legion is going to allow him to get a point by making some friends with the Emperor here and getting some troops that he'll get to push out maybe later. He doesn't have to worry about Highliner in terms of what the cards can do. I guess there is no reason for him to do this first. There are no opponents that have the spice to contest it, and he might not be able to use that Sardaukar army later. Plus, by getting those 2 troops in his garrison, he can really go for a full push later. In terms of unrealized points, we see that Blue or JC is 1 point away on Bene Gesserit, and then either Tannon or John for the alliance. Derek is a point away or a step away from a Spacing Guild point. And other than that, we're not looking at a lot of unrealized points here. We're actually looking at a lot of folks on even steps or at 0 steps. Tannon and JC haven't even touched the Space Spicing Guild. So that could be a place where they go. Similarly, Derek hasn't touched the Fremen Guild. Fremen Guild, the Fremen peoples. So they do have options of kind of moving up those spaces, but a lot of those victory points for playing on those tracks have already kind of been sopped up by the players along the way here. Looks like we're having a respectful break for John, so I'm going to throw a quick pause up until he gets back. Entertainingly, John returned, but then Derek left, so some kind of awkward timing and a pretty long pause there. But we found our way through, and JC dumps out some Bene Gesserit memories here. We see that he has a Lady Jessica in hand. I couldn't quite see if it was the card that he picked up from the memories. If he did, that's dirty, and it's part of the reason why he was willing to skip an action earlier to do that. He flips through. Oh, it is the card that he's picking up from the memories. Of course, he did debate it for a little while. I think that like he was flipping between the might be the faction. No, I don't know what else he'd be considering there. I guess a Missionaria Protectiva is just a free step up, so that could be an option. But I think Jessica with the 2-card draw just seems way too good to pass up on. He might also be going and triggering a deck reshuffle, so maybe he was wary about picking up Jessica because then he won't be able to play her in the future if he plays her this turn and triggers a shuffle of the deck. That might be a consideration. If we see him shuffle his deck, then he made a choice to essentially Jessica this turn, which makes sense. The game might end if Derek wins this combat. Like, he might need access to that power right now, and I think Derek is aware that's the case. He makes his push for a victory point up on the Spicing Guild track here, scoring him up to 8. Now, if he doesn't win this combat, I don't know that he's going to find another way to score 2 points, but we'll try. Tannon is going to head to the research station, try to draw 3 cards, getting him to that Spice Must Flow persuasion level. That's the hope. By the way, I don't think I caught this on Tannon's last turn, but I'm noticing that he's missing a whole bunch of coins, so I do think he used Opulence to score a victory point last turn. I don't think there's anywhere else where he would have dropped that boatload of coins. Also doesn't look like he's won. Oh, he does have a combat 1 there, but it's all for tracks. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's got 4 points on track, starting with 1. That's 5. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he bought an Opulence point last turn. All right, Tannon here draws a bunch of cards and then kind of debates it for a minute, given his intrigue card situation, before passing the turn over. John's had a little while to consider his options here, but it could be that the research station just got nabbed from him, so he's going to use Duncan, Idaho to get his own kind of troops out there, push a few Kais, draw a card. It does look to me like he maybe doesn't have access to Highliner. He's not going to get a 3rd action this turn, so this is his push for combat. And this is where we're really seeing the disadvantage of being the only player who doesn't have the access to Swordmaster. Is you're sort of the first to commit your combat situation for the round. Let's see if that fits my green screen a little bit. And yeah, it looks like he just didn't draw the faction access, and that's part of the problem. John has filled his deck with a handful of, I would argue, mediocre cards, and part of the problem with doing that is the faction access that it grants you. Like, Sardaukar Legion is good. It does really good stuff, but it also limits options, right? Duncan, Idaho is strong, but also water is an expensive cost to do his cool effect, and he doesn't go to a lot of spaces because he's just out there doing normal fighty stuff. JC sees that conflict is a very serious issue here. He's going to push out a couple more troops by heading to Siege Tabor here. Siege Table? The Siege House. Derek here is not able to capitalize, it looks like, action-wise or kind of push-out-wise into the fight. He went up to 9 points. I think I missed it, but basically he probably did kind of like a Leah Kynes High Council thing. And so I said that maybe he wasn't leaning as into Leah Kynes as possible, but just using her as a normal, fundamental way of getting a couple extra persuasion and making that that journey to 9 a reality has been a huge part of Derek's game plan here, which is great as he's going to slide up to 9 points. He's going to be really sad. I mean, you could see his face, his face in his hands there, single hand, I guess. And I think regretting the choices that he made this turn, thinking for sure that John was going to go over top in terms of winning this conflict. And now JC is going to be able to basically take 2 points away. This is one of the few cases where being directly after the player with Highliner has maybe worked in JC's favor, that he's kind of been able to see what the flow is and get the sense of, well, you know what, maybe he's not Highlinering this turn. Maybe there isn't going to be a huge army coming in, and I can just get away with winning this conflict with not a ton of effort. Tannon had taken a pretty quick turn there. Can't quite see what he did. Missing a guy. And then looks like John, I think, might have had the Mentat somehow, maybe with an intrigue card. And used it to kind of pick up some spice, kind of just pass the turn. Reveal here for JC with Peter and having drawn extra cards thanks to Jessica. Gets him up to that 9 for the Spice Must Flow for 7 points. Reveal here for Tannon, I think does similarly as he goes up to 7 points. John here reveals he finally does have access to the High Council seat. However, I think he still doesn't quite hit. We do reveal Tannon revealed actually a Chome Directorate there, which is not crazy exciting for anybody in play, but it's a nice consolation prize if you can't get to 9 and get to 8. I mean, sometimes Chome Directorate is even stronger than Spice Must Flow. I wouldn't say that's the case at this stage of the game. But John essentially buying a handful of mediocre cards to make up for the fact that he could not buy the victory points with his reveal there. I think at this stage, it becomes a foregone conclusion that John is basically not going to be able to win this game. JC is going to move up to 9 with Derek with I mean, it's insane to win a round 7 combat with 3 troops and score 2 victory points. This is a reflection of the fact that the players in this game have primarily focused on development of their economies rather than their garrisons. And because of that, JC is able to take advantage, win a pretty easy combat, and put him up to 9 points. We'll at least flip another 2-pointer here. This might be able to put John back into the game, into spitting distance, but I think the odds that either Derek or JC or both realistically are going to 10 points this game is like nearly 100. The person that winning this combat is most interesting for is Tannon, who doesn't really have the the oomph to do that, I think, because that would put him also at 9 points. So Tannon, I think, needs to do a little bit more on his path to victory here. He'd like to win this combat, do an opulence, and do a Spice Must Flow. That'd be 4 points, or some other system of getting 4 points as possible as well, where he, has an intrigue card that works with what he's got or something. But at this stage, I would say that the game is basically 2-horse race between Jarek and JC. And it's not fully true, but it's not far from being true. John here says, well, I do have it this time. He admittedly didn't need to push this out, but it is possible that JC could have an intrigue card that would push him up to 6 spice. So I agree with John's choice of doing this now, pushing everything into play, getting that water, which might get him access to the research station. But I got to say, with JC and Derek on his tail, both with 2 water, there's absolutely no way he's going to pull that off. JC says, I will go ahead and grab a Mentat. I do get to do Ilban things with this and draw a handful of cards, which is always nice and fun, and it's a way for me to use these excess coins that are basically going to do nothing for me for the rest of the game. My inclination is that Research Station is the juiciest spot for Derek to go here. A second place is not bad in this combat in terms of getting spice for tiebreaker. If he and JC both essentially end up going to 8 points, he could go crazy and try to beat John in this fight. But I don't think his deck spits up a whole ton of support for that unless his intrigue cards are just nasty at fighting, which is possible. He has to be a little bit nervous about whether John is going to take the fold space action, which I think is what he is, why he just asked to see John's discard pile. Does he have access? Does he have a diplomacy available? Is he going to take that fold space action and steal a victory point away from me, which would be absolutely devastating for Derek? And this is a problem that JC doesn't have because his points are not wrapped up in alliances that are stealable from the other players. JC also has a point available to him on Bene Gesserit. Man, the more and more I talk about it and look at it, the more and more it really feels like this is JC's game to win, because he's got a pretty easy point there to have. Derek has a pretty easy point to lose to John here if John has the right faction access. And all of a sudden, that puts us at like a 10-8, 7-7 situation, which is very comfortable to be as a player. Derek kicks off with a random draw off his deck thanks to the intrigue card. Check around the table for how many intrigue cards folks have. Seems like there's a little bit of confusion or tension about what's going on here. Might be that there was a missed intrigue card draw when John pushed up to the Bene Gesserit fourth space. I don't quite know. I was playing at this table behind, and I remember hearing a relatively tense conversation amongst the players at one point. Does look like the judge is interceding here, but I'm not listening to the audio, so I couldn't tell you exactly. And even then, if you hear the audio, I feel like without full context of being at the table, it can be pretty hard to really get a full sense of the situation. So it's one of those things where you catch a game state that changes later, and if the players at the table don't have a table agreement about how they're dealt with, it becomes very awkward to figure out how and what's going to happen. A fold space play from Derek here says, you know what, I really just can't afford you doing something sneaky and weird. I need to make sure that I guarantee myself this victory point, which I agree with. I agree with that defensive play. If he thinks that John can take it from him, absolutely John should take it from him, but it does feel pretty bad because it advances his position absolutely zero, which might end up just essentially conceding that he's getting second place. And in a format where you're going just for first place, I hope that Derek has some other plan there, where he's essentially saying, I have some way of winning, or hoping that JC stumbles, because just taking second place in a format like this is not beneficial. Tannon here fires off the voice and blocks that secret space for the Bene Gesserit. And looks like he picks up a couple of spice. Spice is a tiebreaker here, but not a terribly exciting get for him, I would say. He's also got the crossed arms, I'm a little defeated look, I would say. I think that Tannon seems like he's in trouble, given that he doesn't have his cards in his hand, right? Like, if I'm in his position and I'm thinking that there's a way for me to win this game, I'm constantly counting and double counting what I've got going on, what cards I'm going to play in what sequence, and he does not have that body language. So I think we're getting the sense that Tannon is probably toast in this game at this stage. I'm also realizing here, actually, it's not even just does John have access. I don't think he's he did execute his master stroke. That is how he got all those movements. That's the Bene Gesserit, top of the track. He's also one space away on the Emperor now from his alliance. I should have remembered the master stroke when I was talking about how it felt like he was kind of toast, but it doesn't seem to actually be the case here. Fascinating. John here, it looks like he's going to try to essentially defend the combat by pushing more troops out. This is really fascinating because he would score a victory point by going up to the Emperor. So what I interpret this to be, with him not even pushing, or he does push the troops out, he really needs to make sure that he wins this conflict, which is fine. But I don't think winning this conflict even wins him the game. I think that if I was going to play this line, here's what I thought he was trying to do with it, was essentially prevent other people from pushing enough troops out by going to that location, right? And praying that Derek and JC have no way of scoring a victory point between now and the end of the game. JC, however, will blow that theory straight out of the water immediately by playing Lady Jessica, paying for the 2 spice for the top Bene Gesserit action, and ripping 4 cards off the top of his deck, practically guaranteeing that he's going to buy a Spice Must Flow as well this turn. JC at this point has only 3 victory points from alliances, and he's sitting at 10 points. So he acquired 6 points in other means. Is that right? Yep, 6 points in other means. I think primarily from buying Spice Must Flows. But no, 3 of them are from combats, right? 1 there and then 2 from the last turn. So 3 in combats, 3 in Spice Must Flows so far. 3, 3, and 3, a very even and measured approach. Looks even and measured, but it really is based off of Bene Gesserit cards. Looks like an early reveal for Tannon. No. It's just the Reverend Mother to allow him to take that secret space, get some intrigue cards. I believe this is also going to affect other players, forcing them to discard. We see players contemplating their hands, so I do think that that's likely the case here. Yeah, JC's got a discard ready. Oh, is that a diplomacy discarded? Fascinating. So, I mean, that makes sense. He actually doesn't have anywhere that he wants to go on the alliance tracks anymore. He's kind of hit all of his even steps. And it's only worth 1 persuasion. Derek, by the way, went to the research station and then I believe used the beast to push a bunch of troops into play. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Which, you know, second place will give him spice for tiebreaker-y stuff. But he also has the face of someone who looks like they're defeated. I think that we are sitting at a table of people who are going to be unable to unseat JC's supremacy at this stage. I think largely reflecting on this game, it really comes down to how powerful Lady Jessica is, and the fact that JC already had a couple of Bene Gesserit cards or interactions between the Bene Gesserit that allowed Lady Jessica to become even more powerful, right? He got to play it again last turn thanks to the Other Memories card, and it looks like he did not trigger a deck reshuffle with Lady Jessica last turn because here we are seeing her again. So she's just done a ton of work throughout the way. And yeah, I mean, I think that Tannon, Derek, and JC all did kind of like a fundamental worker placement-y, get the coins, do the High Council, get the Sword Masters sort of approach to the game. I like that John made the brave play of essentially not doing those things, although he did slip into the High Council at the end of the game. But between the combats in the mid game, not really coughing up a lot of points, and the kind of ring around the rosy sharing that people had, doing that along the way, it didn't end up working out for him, as he just kind of like doesn't have the gas to go anywhere at the end of the game, and is barely just trying to play catch up here. Tannon, I think, struggled a little bit on the conflict side of things. He picks up a good number of points from, primarily his points are from alliances and tracks. He also got an opulence, but yeah, basically didn't end up winning any points from conflict along the way. JC will limp in here for a couple spice. Looks like Derek did do a reveal and then maybe I think missed buying a Spice Must Flow this turn. JC just threatening Spicing Guild move here as an extra flex. He might even score an additional victory point there. All right, Derek did not reveal because I just missed what he did. He's playing an Imperial Spy now to draw an intrigue card, it looks like. It's maybe an outside chance that he also could get up to the top of the Emperor track and get that Emperor Alliance there, which would be pretty spicy for him. There's intrigue cards that can do that. That would be one hell of a draw off the top of the deck. What did Derek do last turn? He must have played some plot card that allowed him to pass the turn or something. Draw a card and do nothing or something like that. Explain why I was a little confused about his turn. This is the downside of playing at 200% speed and also not listening to their audio directly. But I find the audio to be really distracting. All right, we'll get a shove aside of the Chome directorship here. Tan just making sure no one can do some nonsense with that, which is entirely reasonable, as we've got a couple people who would score a victory point off of a Chome directorship. So essentially hate drafting that at this stage is really, really reasonable. And then he moves up to fully steal the Bene Gesserit point, knocking John into a pretty dead space, but putting Tannon much closer into spitting distance here. Passes over to John, who is already done for the round. Bene Gesserit memories here. Doesn't remember anything, just looks to the future. And is JC just picking up extra spice with that remaining water there as tiebreaker points because he sees that there's nothing else he can do to get actual points, and says, I'll just grab as many tiebreakers as I can, which makes a ton of sense. Derek has not revealed, but somehow passed the turn again. So I think he did the same thing as last time. Yeah, some kind of punt action. We see Tannon here dropping a whole bunch of spice. Maybe he had some kind of card. Oh, I see. He had an intrigue card that let him spend the spice for a victory point, putting him up to 9. That's really nice. Full economy 9-pointer for Tannon, which is pretty fun. JC here goes for a reveal, picks up a Spice Must Flow, pushes himself to 12 points. Lee Kynes there is going to be another Spice Must Flow. Push to 10. Looks like everyone's maybe passed out for the round. And looks like that's going to make JC our winner at about 12 points to 10 to 9 to 7 as John's about to win this conflict. And JC has got a whole pile of spice there. It's possible that they'll reveal some endgame points, but there aren't going to be enough there to change anything. Tannon reveals a hand of just tons of conflict. We see a little bit of conflict on John's side here. Certainly people would be able to score a point maybe with a staged battle or something like that. Looks like John does get a point there end game wise, so he actually gets a little bit closer than it looks like. So we have a 9-9-10, but a definitive victory at 12 for JC, who just demonstrates the incredible power of the future sight along the way. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, do the like and subscribe thing. See y'all around.